Okay, hello everybody, and welcome to the second joint BLGL VirtueCast recording on 7/8/2021. Radio Free Didascalos, Mark Miner here, and Todd Nickerson, TN in the TN. Over there, here we're sitting in a gorgeous amphitheater with the pine trees behind us. As you can see, using the magic power of Skype to share a few old-fashioned stories. I'm building to hit the OPUS GENERIS poems. There's 5 of them, and they kind of add up to something. There's some momentum to the whole series. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of those 5 poems, I think it would be crucial to have some discussions about what the gender identity formation process looks like from an overview. So we're just going to be chill today. We're not going to do any complicated, fancy poetry. We're just going to talk about where babies come from and where the identities come from that make a regular guy get together with a regular girl and get married and have kids. That's what we call the telos, the final goal. But there's a lot of rough road to be covered before we get there. I'm a person who's full of ideas, so I've learned over the years that it's best to get other people to unpack their ideas first, so we have at least some common ground. So, Todd, do you acknowledge yourself to be a member of a heterosexual species?
Yes, for the most part.
So we're not in science fiction. We're not in Isaac Asimov with 3 genders, not reproducing parthenogenically by one gender. We're familiar with the idea that there's 2 genders.
Well, I mean, that's certainly. I don't. To be perfectly honest, I don't know if I have a solidified opinion on that. I feel like I learn a lot of new things from encountering people, and I believe that it's complicated, and we know that there are intersexed people, which means that you're talking about somebody who has, in some combination of both male and female, and given that can happen, I don't see how it's going to be limited to physical, because the brain is a lot more complicated than the body is in terms of programming, right? I mean.
Sure enough, I'll give you your intersex conditions. I'll give you a certain amount of gender confusion on the part of young persons. In the terms of producing babies, though, do you ever hear about actual functional children coming from outside of the 1 egg, 1 sperm conjunction?
I've heard of some. I actually have heard that there are cases where 2 eggs have been fertilized by 2 different men, and the mother has the
Sure, that's
babies.
fraternal twins. Yeah, fraternal twins. Yeah. Most animals will have multiple little animals, multiple births.
But you're usually, when you're talking fraternal twins, you're talking about the same father. But I have heard of cases where where 2 different babies from 2 different fathers have been born concurrently. It's pretty rare. I think it's like 1 in a billion or something like that. But I have heard that.
Oh yeah.
It has.
If the woman's having sex with 2 different men on the same night, sure, yeah. Okay, but normally though, I mean, we're talking about leaving aside the 0.001 biological accidents or the confused teenagers. Basically, reproduction happens with 1 man and 1 woman.
Yes.
Okay. That is profound and wonderful and amazing aspect of nature. I'm not quite there yet, but I guess all my ancestors were. So, like, what percentage of your ancestors were able to figure out the heterosexual thing? You got 2, 4, 8, 16 ancestors.
Well, how far back are we going?
As far back as sexual reproduction goes, percentage-wise, how many of them were able to figure out the male-female thing?
Well, clearly all of them figured it out on some level, because I wouldn't be here otherwise, and you wouldn't be here otherwise.
Prima facie. There you are.
So,
There you are, sir. There you are. Look at yourself in the mirror, and what a handsome fellow you are in your mauve shirt there. So that's prima facie evidence, at least, that, you know, we do, you know, whatever our personal adventures might be, we do look on a fairly substantial background of heterosexual success, which is the ground of our being, at least biologically. So, as a starting point, I tend to throw at people cyberleonaptis. When a little kid is born, before a kid is born, right, whatever gender it is, it's a little clump of cells, and it divides and divides. And eventually, it starts looking more and more like it looks kind of like a lizard at the first, because ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. But there it is in the womb. Eventually, the little buds grow, and you get little hands and arms, and the head kind of comes into proportion with the body. And so, what proportion of the physical inflow and outflow that represent this kid's existence, what percentage of that is going back and forth between the fetus and the mother's body, and what percentage is between the fetus and the outside world before it's born?
oh, that's a good question. Well, obviously there's quite a high percentage of feedback between the mother and the child. The fetus couldn't survive without the mother's nutrients and everything, and you know, that's just the food source. But we can also talk about the mother's you know, like the sort of psychological effect that she has on her child.
Just certainly. If she's horse riding while she's pregnant, or if she's listening to music while she's pregnant, I'm sure all those things are going to affect the kid. My dad worked as utilities engineer for the naval station down here in San Diego, and so the ships would come and they would tie up at the dock, and my dad was responsible for doing all the utilities hookups, so that the water and the steam and the electricity and everything else could go into the ship, and of course all the waste products and the junk could flow from the big Navy ship back into the shoreside sewage treatment facilities. So that's sort of my image for the umbilical, or what actually we used to say the placenta relationship between the baby, the umbilical cord coming out of its belly button, the placenta, the uterus, and then the rest of the mom's body. So it's not just a matter of the nutritious fluids coming in, containing you know, carbohydrates and oxygen and all the other things that are necessary to metabolism. All the little waste products of the kid's body, at whatever level it's functioning at, have to go out by the same belly button.
Right.
So in physical terms, 100%, and the mother's emotional state. You know, if the mother's taking drugs, what happens to the kid?
It's going to impact the child's development.
Right. My sister.
Some drugs more than others, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it pretty much does pass into the kid. If the mom drinks, you know, pregnant women aren't supposed to drink, or if the mom is on drugs. My sister actually was infertile with her husband, but she worked in OBGYN as a nurse. And this woman came in who was on drugs, but they were able to clean out the system. The baby was born healthy, and that's my sister adopted her and brought her up, and now she works for Bank of America, and she's married and she has 2 kids of her own. So that's wonderful. I never thought I would have a Greek family member, but now I have this niece who's actually by all accounts Greek. So that worked out amazingly well. Fortunately, the mother's drug use didn't impact the kid too bad, because, like I say, she went to a nice college and has a nice job. So then, so having established that as sort of the root and the ground of being for an infant, we have this terrible and horrible event of birth, to where the kid, you know, comes out, and then what happens to the umbilical cord?
The placenta, it comes out with the placenta, and generally they sever the umbilical cord at or right after birth.
Right. You get sometimes you get these hippies who'll do the underwater birth. They'll take the kid out and they'll cut the sack and they'll have the kid rest on his mother's breast with the umbilical cord still attached for an hour or two. And then once the kid's had a chance to process and start breathing and stuff a little bit, then they'll go ahead and cut it. But try to imagine what that's like for a little kid who has never known any other source, who has always been 100% connected to his mom, and they cut the cord. and all of a sudden he's on his own, and he's never breathed before, he's never cried before. None of that stuff that's all new to him. So you can imagine what a shock to the system that would be. Because before you've been in a space where everything is taken care of for you, and then boom, here you are in this cold, cruel world. So it's very easy to keep track of the physical ins and outs, and the typical modern science can look at the amount of carbohydrates going in the placenta, waste products coming back through the umbilical cord. What's difficult is to try to track the psychic processes, what kind of psychic energy is passing between the mom and the kid, because of course that's invisible, and being invisible and intangible, it's not subject to scientific investigation. But whatever it is, when a kid is born and is laying there on his mother's breast, assuming in the old-fashioned sense that the kid's being breastfed and the mom is taking care of its diapers and all that, you can start to sketch out how much psychic interaction there is between the mom and the kid. Because who breastfeeds it, right? The mom, right? Pretty much not the dad. Maybe that's changing in the future. Who knows? Maybe they'll have like rent-a-breast that the man could pop in and use, whatever. But traditionally, it's been the mom that does the breastfeeding and takes care of the kid, changes the diapers, removes the waste products, so the kid is not uncomfortable. It can be uncomfy when you need your diaper changed. And the kid is looking at the mom, and the mom is looking at the kid, right? So there's this focused attention that the kid's going to give the mom, because the kid is dependent on the mom for warmth, for safety, for affection, for milk, for cleanliness, for everything. So when the mom is not there, that's trauma. When the mom is there, that's good. So there's a lot of the gothic psychodrama of the mother is fort, the mother is da, the mother is gone, the mother is there. This is the peekaboo game. And although the umbilical cord is cut, still the food and the food, at least, and the water are still coming in from the mom. And so all of those things then are reflected in the various psychic processes. And Nicolosi, in his text, will talk about the attachment. That's the word for whether the kid is connected to the mom or not. The gendering thing happens at a certain point, because so far what we said is it has no gender. It happens to little girl babies, little boy babies, exactly the same. No gender, little girl babies, little boy babies. Everything we've said is true all the way along. At a certain point, though, we have this amazing superhero of gender comes in. And this is where things start to get exciting and where we get gender differences. And this is what they call the salient male. And that's salio for my jump, because the salient male is one who jumps out. So you have some non-salient males sometimes, either a father who has left or a father who works and he comes home and he goes to bed. But the salient male is when the dad or the stepdad or somebody, male, comes in and the kid has had a long day of being a baby and being on the breast and doing stuff with mom like it does. And then the dad comes home, picks up the baby and starts throwing it up and down in the air and teaches and introduces the baby to a new and different realm of existence than being with mom, because typically the dad's play is high energy, whereas the mother's play is entirely concerned with the baby's safety. Right? And you can see that that's pretty obvious, right? You don't catch moms throwing kids up in the air and stuff like that, whereas dads are not going to do the breastfeeding and the diaper changing and say, oh, I'm going to hold him for 5 minutes, now I'm going to give him back. Typically the dad's like, okay, I'm here, let's do something, kid. You can only do so much for the baby, but whatever it is, the dads will do it. So the salient male, that's a fairly interesting process, and it's very interesting to having done post-gay therapy with my fellow people who want to get past the gay stuff for years, because the dads will come in and the dads will typically look like the faces on Mount Rushmore. Right? These are guys who just don't have the interactivity to them, and they kind of sit there and they're like, well, I don't see how I could have done anything differently, right? And my dad's like that. He's an engineer. And so my issue is that I'm a glass breaker. When I see a kid that's not involved, I will go ahead and break the glass and start talking to them and involve them and engage them and entertain them if I can. If I'm not, unless I have a super ego thing to say, that's not appropriate, don't do it. But that's what's natural for me. So the post-gay work for me is kind of an interesting trade-off to where I have excess break the glass energy to communicate with these dads, these American dads who don't know how to interact with their sons. They don't have the BL thing going on at all. Just like I hope to have some interaction with you, and you can maybe give me like 1 or 2% of your gift for appreciating les jeunes filles, which I haven't got that at all, but you do. So I'm hoping that some of that rubs off on me. Okay, so the salient male. What's hilarious is how different the salient male looks in different cultures. In America, with a teenager, the dad is supposed to come and take the son and play catch with him as if they were getting ready to play football for 15 minutes before dinner, right? This is normal. This is considered acceptable. A mom who said no to that, well, you can play for 15 minutes, but not 20 minutes because I made dinner at 6 o'clock. You know, a mom who said no to that or tried to shut that down, I think that would be considered going a little too far on the mom's part if the father's not allowed to play catch with the dad. On the other hand, if a father does more than that, is pulling the son away more, then, well, who has time for that? What American dad has time to do more than that? So typically the American dad will hand the kid off to the Boy Scouts or the public school or the church, hoping that the kid will transfer his affections to that. But what we're looking at in the post-gay work is this very delicate process of starting when the kid is a baby, pulling the kid away from the mom by being the salient male with age-appropriate activities. Obviously, you're not going to play football with an infant. At the same time, you're not going to bounce a teenager on your knee. You know, at every different age, there are different age-appropriate activities that you're going to want to engage your son in. Some men are good at this, and some boys are naturally willing to go off with dad and do dad stuff. Some boys are just less responsive, and a lot of that's the cards you get dealt. I got dealt a very bad hand of cards to where my interests are here, making one circle. My dad's interests are over here, making another circle, and those circles never really overlapped. He was a mid-50s man. He was into cars. He was going into his church. He was very into family life. He was very interested, my house, my church, my car, my wife, my children. And I'm a very quiet person. I'm into gardening. I'm into poetry. I'm into very introverted type pursuits. And so we just never had any overlap, and it was always an agonizing bore when he would try to get me to do his stuff. And I'm sure he felt my interest in orchids or whatever was equally boring. So what we're looking at with this first poem.
I just wanted to say I have much the same experience. My dad was very blue collar, still is.
What did your dad do?
And he's done a variety of things. During my childhood, he was a truck driver for quite a long time. He was a mason, rock, brick, tile layer for many years. He's done a little bit of everything. He's worked as a corrections officer. He's one of those people who is very much into masculine pursuits, and I am not. I am very much into, I guess it depends on how you define masculine, but I am very much like you. I'm an introvert. I'm very much into reading and books and drawing and, those sorts of things. And I was never much of a physical person. Some of that stems from the fact that I am disabled. I was, of course, born without my right hand, which prevented me from doing a lot of things. I think a lot of it also is the fact that I am by default a lefty, a left-hander, because I have to be. But I think I was meant to be right-handed. As when I first started writing, I wrote backwards. I had to learn how to write forward. So, yeah. Anyway, I was very much not.
Todd, you're moving around what looks to me like your right hand. It looked to me like you were moving around your right hand, but you say you.
This is my left hand.
Okay, it must be reversed as far as the.
It's reversed on here, apparently.
Okay. Okay, so you felt like by natural dominance, you should have been a right-handed person, but the right hand didn't develop. So you've got what you have is a left hand, and you've gotten as far through life as you have by learning how to use your left hand to do everything.
Correct. well, everything that it's possible to do with one hand. You know, there were certain things that I was not able to do that I never could master. One of them being tying shoes. So to this day, I do not wear shoes with laces, or if I do, I thread the laces throughout the shoe and just, you know, tuck them in and don't really tie them. But yeah, I had, if I couldn't do it, if it couldn't be done with the left hand, then I couldn't do it. And I would, you know, there were some things were more difficult than other things. Sharpening pencils in the school, pencil sharpeners was particularly.
The crank kind, yeah.
Yeah, the crank is on the wrong side, so I would have to have other people, other kids sharpen my pencils for me, and usually they were pretty happy to oblige. But anyway, yeah. So I don't want to make this all about me. I just wanted to point that out, that I have much.
No, it's good. It's
like
good.
you, I'm, yeah, very much a introverted child, and I don't know how much of that is innate and how much is a product of my disability and my circumstances. But in any case,
well, it's where all of our art and literature comes from, is from introverted people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So the whole point of the podcast, which we're totally on track to do, is to take these abstract stages that Nicolosi talks about in the book and try to put flesh on them from your personal experience, from my personal experience, and then most importantly, from the myths. Because with the myths, you can always feel like you're on track to some larger chunk of wisdom. Because if I shorten my stories too much, then it's like, well, that's my failures or your failures, whatever. And it's like, well, the whole point is to get beyond that. So with the Cybele and Attis, what you have is a religious manifestation of this impulse to go back and be with the mom. Because when you're with the mom, all your needs are met, and she smiles at you and she affirms your existence and everything is hunky-dory, which is good at a certain stage of development. But boys get pulled off to doing masculine things with their dad, and some of them are very good at that, and some of them compete and they win glory and they like being with dad and they want to be like dad, and that's how the whole male gender formation thing happens. I'm not, well, let me put it this way. I'm concerned to depict that process through a series of poems which show different stages of it failing. So any one of these poems represents a failure, but taken together they represent, you know, a continuous dialectic of forward movement towards the telos, the end goal of being a husband and father. Now, when I say dialectic, that's very much a buzzword these days, because there's a discussion of whether we should go forward with the CRT, the critical race theory, in the classrooms, or whether that exists at all, whether it's a communist takeover, whether it's just teaching history truly, whether it's a manifestation of racial dialectic, whatever. James Lindsay, who's talking about this very actively, says it all goes back to Hegel. And since my uncle taught German, I thought I would go back and look at some Hegel and see if I could see what Hegel was trying to say now that I'm old enough and have done some Plato. So are you familiar with the idea of dialectic?
I am a little bit.
Okay, so the nutshell is that you start with a thesis of some sort, but then there's stuff that's not included in that thesis, and it makes itself felt somehow. So then we get das Negativ, what Hegel calls das Negativ, which is where all this external excluded material. Yeah, antithesis is the better known formulation, but since I'm doing the actual Hegel now, I have to use das Negativ in the Swabian German. Das Negativ, the material that was not included in that original thesis, makes itself felt, right? And we're getting a lot of this politically. The people who have not been at the apex of the American socio-political pyramid are saying, well, it's all got to be taken apart, it's all got to be dismantled, it's all systemic, and those systems have been built without us in mind, and so it all has to be taken down. And then the thesis and the antithesis will then roll around in the mud to produce a synthesis which incorporates and transcends both of what there was. And you can see that happening politically as you get black people in Supreme Court, black people in the House and the Senate, you get a black president more and more, and so you're having this integration at the highest political level of all chunks of American society, and that's what we had always thought would happen, and it is happening. Not happening fast enough to please some people, happening too fast for other people, but it is happening. Switching, now that we're up and running with the dialectic, if you look at the sexual identity formation process, the dialectic is really prominent with something like the mom's breast, because the original position is that the child is at the breast, and then there is das Negativ. There's things that are not included in the breast. I mean, there's a lot included in there. That's all you need when you're a baby, right? But the father shows up, and the father is the opposite. The father is the opposite because he's male, he's dynamic, he's hairy, he smells different, he's more physical, he's more muscular. He takes the baby and he plays with it. And there's this regular thing of dad comes home at 5:15 every day and plays with the baby, and that's salient because it's different than mother time. The dad time is different than the mother time. Mm-hmm. So if the boy is to grow up to be a man, he has to not be a baby forever, because you can't be a dad if you're still a baby. So the father then teaches the son all these masculine arts, emotional self-control, how to have a job, how to have skills, how to learn stuff. And all of these things represent a cancellation. It's a taking away of the breast from the boy, in the sense that you're taking the boy away from the breast. So that's the antithesis. The father's in the antithesis to the mother. But then later on in life, there's what we call the Aufhebung, which is the heaving up or the taking away. So the breast is taken away from the boy, but then he does all this masculine stuff. He goes to college and gets a job and completes the masculine tasks, the initiation and individuation tasks of a young man. And then the breast comes back to him when he dates women his own age, but it does not come back to him as the mother's breast. It comes back to him as a breast which he is in a position to then offer to children of the next generation. So it's a mother's breast, but it's not his mother's breast for him. It's the mother's breast of his wife for his kids. So you see how the breast is the same. It's still the same mother's breast, but it's been completely aufgehoben, right? It's been taken up and transcended and made into something that's different, but it incorporates both the functionality of the mother's breast and the masculine identity of the father that interrupts the mother-son relationship. But then when the son grows up to become a father, he is in a position to establish a household, get a wife of his own choosing, and start a family of his own. And those kids, if they are to go on, they will get a chance to have a mother's breast of their own. So that's the Aufgehoben, where the thing is taken away, but it's also brought back in a transcended higher form. And we also start to see the fractal nature of male identity. Because if you think of a leaf of a fern, it has a little piece, and then another little piece, and another little piece, each one going in a slightly different direction. So as the male life continues, the son creates a household that's similar to his father's in many ways. You're your father's son. You can't get away from that. But it's also subtly different, because it has to be not with mom, but it has to be with a young woman of his own age. And yet, for all that I fight against my father and claim to have nothing in common with my father, I'm still very much the son of a utilities engineer. And that makes itself felt in various ways. My dad is a Presbyterian. I don't go to the Presbyterian church anymore, but it doesn't matter. I'm still very much Presbyterian. I'm still very much Welsh. My father's people are from Ohio. I'm still very much Midwestern, even though I live in San Diego. So my life, in many ways, is a miniature copy of my father's, but with slight twists and turns. And if I have sons, they're going to be like their father, their grandfather, their great father, but they're going to do things a little bit differently in their own way. So you get this continuous fractal-like, if you look down through the generations of Welshmen before me, we Welsh talk a lot about this under the aspect of druidic reincarnation, that there's only so many souls and they get recycled. I don't know. Both the fractal image and the Welsh druidic image are far too corny and useless to be used to this discussion, but they're fun to play with. So these stages of being one with the mother and the salient father coming in and bouncing the kid on the knee, these are figured as very abstract things in Nicolosi's work. And so it's good to know about them in the abstract level, but it's also very useless, because it's like, okay, because you try to have a discussion group about this with 10 guys who are dealing with same-sex attraction issues, and it's like, okay, you need to know these stages. Oneness with the mother, discuss. Okay, you can't really discuss oneness with the mother on the abstract level, because why do you talk? I mean, if you're a baby and all your needs are getting met, you have no reason to talk. If you've been born and you're outside of the womb all you can do is scream and cry, and then mother comes. So this is a very non-cognitive, non-articulate thing that you can't talk about, this oneness with the mother business. So that's why I find Nicolosi's approach unsatisfactory. And yet this is something that must be fought out, because I would literally see, and this is terrifying from the psychological point of view, I would literally see in various groups that I was a part of, the mother would bring the teenage son in by the hand, and she would tell the story. Oh, I homeschooled this boy. I take him with me on vacations. I take him with me everywhere I go. We do Bible study together, so there's no spiritual figure outside of her. We do Bible study together. I do everything Christian with him. And now, oh, I'm so shocked and offended. He has homosexual porn under his bed. What am I going to do with it? And I sit there quietly and I listen. And the mother does all the talking, and the teenage boy never gets to do any talking in this group. And eventually, me being me and loving to break the glass, I said, I've heard enough from this person, pointing to the mom. I want to hear from this person, pointing to the teenage son. So there are processes of separation, which in the homosexual, if it's a kid with same-sex attractions, what I call a little gay boy Timmy, which is my mock acronym for LGBT. So little gay boy Timmy comes into the group. His mother is taking him by the hand. He can't talk. He can't say anything. So the individuation, the separation from mom that should have happened when he was, 2 or 3, is not happened when he's like 16, 17. And the group leaders are not seeing, they're not giving him separate time. And that to me is terrifying. So what I wanted to do is find a poem to fight back against that and to talk explicitly about how strong the mother-son bond is and what happens when you pull on that to try to break it. Because, of course, if I try to pull the son away, the son's going to bungee back as soon as I let go. So the separation process is crucial, but it's something that it's not something you can make happen because of the elastic nature of these psychic relationships. So what I do is I reflect them from the outside. And so just like when a fruit becomes ripe, it eventually falls, because there's what's called an abscission layer where the cells die and then the leaf falls off and the fruit falls off. So also these stories help catalyze the abscission process. Abscission is where the thing separates, right? So the Cybele and Attis story figures the mother-son relationship as a religious thing, because you can't physically go back inside your mom. That doesn't work. But back in the day, outside of the Jewish worldview, there were a lot of mother goddess cults in the Near East. Freud and Jung were very up on them. The Romans had to fight against them being established in Rome. But the idea is you would all sort of dance around a mother goddess figure, and by means of ecstatic song, ecstatic music, and Lord knows how much alcohol and drugs were involved, you would achieve this ecstatic oneness with the mother goddess figure. Everyone in the cult would achieve this, and boundaries would be dissolved, and everything would be wonderful. So with Cybele and Attis, we have Attis. The poem is written by Catullus in the first century, but the Greek myth is much, much older. But Catullus, being very much a Roman boy himself, figures Attis as a regular Roman boy who's going to the gym and working out and building up a strong body, and he's building the homosocial bonds. So the men in the gym know him as a promising young man. They're all attracted to him in the way that Greek men are attracted to young men. And he is very popular. And so he has had a very promising start at being a young athlete, which is why I illustrated it by images of Bruce Jenner, back when he was Bruce Jenner, on the Wheaties box, on the Olympic podium. There's pictures of him as a boy, as a young athlete, as an Olympic victor, as a middle-aged husband and father, and then, of course, in transition to Caitlyn Jenner, which is where he is now. Whether he's going to continue the arc and become governor of California, we will have to see. But certainly Bruce Jenner in our time provides an excellent example of the Cybele and Attis arc, where he does all the things a man is supposed to do to create a male identity for himself. But when push comes to shove, the connection to mother is paramount. And so he always felt this massive connection to mother, and there was this part of him that never disconnected from her, so much though that his real gender expression is his mother's gender. And so rather than looking at the two states separately as if they were merit badges to be earned in a Boy Scout program, what Cybele and Attis does is it gives you the emotional richness and tension of the pull between being one with Cybele, who's the powerful mother goddess, and the desire to make the strong body for himself in the gym. And you see both of those in Cybele and Aptus. So does that strike any chords with you, do you think?
I don't know. I guess there's definitely a seed there that obviously there's a seed of truth there, but I feel like maybe it's a bit limited. It seems like it's a very sort of I always feel a little bit I don't know, put off by these sorts of Freud is, we get into Freud and all of the stuff that he said, but I do feel like from what the material that I've read and everything, I feel like this is only one side of a multi-dimensional story that may be true in some cases, but may not be true in other cases, I guess, if that's
certainly that's a fair enough.
What I mean. Because I've read that birth order can determine, or at least have an effect on the development of sexuality. I've read that there's a multitude of things that can impact this. I feel we start getting into dangerous waters when we start trying to fit everything into kind of one mold. I'm not.
Certainly, there's nothing we need so much as a really good phenomenology, a really good study of the gender identity formation process. My pushback is primarily against the Christian narrative tradition, which tries to talk about gender, but there are no mother goddesses whatsoever at the middle of the Judeo-Christian storytelling tradition. There's the mother goddesses are goddesses that the young men run off to, but then they always come back. Yahweh always is full of grief for his missing sons, and he calls them back. So there's a complete absence of mother goddess figures to give you something to talk about in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and yet they're trying to do the gender for men who are caught up in mother goddess issues. And that to me seems it requires a different approach. So my focus is on the glass being half full, in the sense that going from the Judeo-Christian gender tradition to the classical tradition, you have some representation of what's going on with the mother goddess. Now, the glass is half empty in the sense that what's going on between Cybele and Attis in particular may scratch the itch of any young man coming in to work on his gender, and it may not. Certainly, there should be more stories of what it's like to be with the mother goddess and what it's like to escape from the mother goddess. There is, for instance, a book called Runaway Bunny. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's not the kind of thing that I spend a lot of time reading. Well, it's kind of based on a Celtic myth of a shapeshifter, but what happens is the runaway bunny is with mommy, and the runaway bunny goes here, and the mother finds it and gets it back again, and the runaway bunny goes there, and the mother finds it and gets it back again, and it goes to a third place, and the mother finds it and gets it back again. And it's a kind of thing that I can already feel myself falling asleep, because it represents sort of the mindset of a sleepy little 4, 5, 6-year-old kid. And if you like that kind of thing, it's very sweet, but
there's no drama.
I want to see the chord snap. That's what I'm into. That's what I'm all about. That's where the excitement is. That's where the identity formation is for me. But the thing is, you can't just reach into a person's soul and snap the chord. That doesn't work. What you can do is provide programming with enough variety and enough representation of these processes that something will catch the eye of the kid. So, if it's not Cybele and Attis, then maybe it's the runaway bunny. If it's not the runaway bunny, maybe it's a third or fourth thing from a different mythology. If it's none of those, Todd, You're the one who's sitting down there writing stories. Maybe, the magic poetic power will descend on you, and you will write the story that unlocks the hearts of, people struggling with gender everywhere. That's, I think, the task of the poet in every generation. My shtick is to do the traditional stuff. I don't have the ability to come up with new stuff. I tried that. As the first thing I ever wanted to be was a comic book artist. I cannot draw for shit. I cannot make up new stories for shit. What I do have is the ability to go back and do the traditional stories. So that's what I'm doing. But as always, the emphasis is on getting, it's kind of like a process, like, when you're trying to break into a safe, and you have that dial on a safe, talk about a combination lock. You kind of like turn it very slowly and carefully one way, and you turn it very slowly and carefully the other way. And you have to be super quiet, and your fingers have to be super sensitive, because at a certain point, as you're turning it, you can hear the little subtle sound of the tumblers click, settling into place. And that to me is the fun of working with ancient myths, is to try to find what story that causes people's tumblers to click into place.
Yeah. Well, my first love, it's interesting that you mentioned comic books. My first love as a child was science fiction. And so right from the beginning, my mind has always been oriented towards the new, the cutting edge, I guess, if you will, the revolutionary in terms of, and all of these things. As a young boy, of course, I was fascinated with aliens and spaceships and that sort of thing that every modern boy seems to be into. But as I got older, I became more interested in the cultural side, the political side of these things. And I started to read people like Octavia Butler and the writers who were doing their side of the story. They weren't stories about spaceships at war. They were writing stories of alien cultures and how they existed and different things like that. So as a teenager, of course, this interest kind of coincided with the other side of me, which is the horror side. I'm very much interested in monsters and things that are kind of considered, monstrous or different and weird, and those sort of things. And a lot of that, of course, stemmed from the fact that I was very much a different. I mean, I'm one of those people. I stick out in a crowd, and then on top of that, my sexuality and all of the baggage that comes with that. I've always been very much interested in that sort of thing. So I do have a foundation in mythology. Of course, as a child, I read a lot of that mythology, mostly because I love the monsters. I loved Sphinx and the harpies and all of the creatures. That's just where my head was at. But later on, I started to absorb the messages of those myths and get a little bit more into the past of the old fairy tales and things like that. So my path has been a circuitous one in terms of coming back to the mythologies and the Campbellian philosophy of mythology. It's the hero's journey. And, so anyway, I came at it from a very different point of view.
No, I second and support all that. I was all about the science fiction. I was all about the H.P. Lovecraft. There's that early work of H.P. Lovecraft's where he realizes that he's living in the basement. He comes up to the social world, and there's a ball, and he shows his ugly face, and everyone runs away. And he sees this terrible monster, and he realizes why everyone is running away. And he looks in the mirror and he says, I see the monster now. And it turns out it's just him seeing himself because he doesn't have an attractive social face. that profound isolation expressed by the young H.P. Lovecraft, that just absolutely moves me to tears. I don't remember what the title of it was, but it's
a
sort
story
of
called The Outsider, which
the
is
Outsider.
a very fitting title. Yes. So yeah, and then I kind of yeah, again, yes, I came at it from that, and I definitely related to that. I definitely felt like a huge outsider, and I've always kind of felt like I didn't really belong anywhere. And then I discovered Clive Barker, and I read the novel Cabal, and he makes the monsters the heroes, and it was a revolutionary idea for me. And I think from that point on, I began to embrace who I was as a ethical person with, I think Barker showed me that you can have the monstrous and you can still reconcile it with social expectations and and morality, and so that to me was the starting point, I guess, if you will, of my philosophical growth. And as it
let me make sure I got it. Clive Barker, because I got to put links to this in the bottom. Clive Barker's Cabal.
The story's called Cabal. It's there's a film based on it. It's not a great film, but it's not bad. It's called Nightbreed, because the creatures in the story are called Nightbreed. But the original story is called Cabal, Cabal, Cabal,
gotcha.
And it's all about. I actually have a really long essay that I wrote about my involvement with that book and how it changed the way I thought and all sorts of things. And I can share that with you and or with the viewers if you like. But
oh yeah, we'll do it.
But yeah, so yeah, that's how I came at it. And
so one novelty that I'm inspired to bring up, because what you said, maybe I'm just pulling this out of my back pocket, maybe I'm just making this stuff up. There are lots of science fiction minded people who are looking at a future in which things are different. My gaze is almost entirely towards the past and bringing the Norse sagas and the Homeric poetry and all the claptrap of the old heroic ideals into the present. But there are people like Schrodinger's trans cat, which we'll provide that link for folks. Schrodinger's trans cat, who are all about, number one, being a girl. I think this is a person who's born in a male body, but they want to be a girl, and they want to be with girls because doing the lesbian thing is so exciting for them. And third, they are deeply into this goddess type figure inside the computer, which it may be, has the power to grant them this wish, at least when they're online, to be a girl and to be with girls. And that's entirely, he's really looking at a post-masculine vision of the future, where more and more people are attracted into the net, and because the net is so feminine, they all become feminine, at least in their avatars, and interact with other people as feminine, as daughters of this mother goddess figure inside the net. And again, that if you like science fiction, if you want something that's a contrast to the very stiff traditional stuff that I lay out, you might find the trans cat interesting.
We're frozen up.
Okay, I'm seeing, I can hear you, so just keep on talking. Don't worry about the video, because, as long as they can hear the flow of the conversation, that's the main thing. Yeah, your picture's a little stuck there. Frozen. Keep talking, I can hear you. Yep, you moved. Are you back? Internet fart. Sorry, folks, we're having technical difficulties. Todd is freezing up.